On the Market is back. I'm Tina Cortez, and this is York Region's only radio real estate show. Over to my co-host Asif Khan from Remax Prime Properties with today's next guest. Asif.
Thank you, Tina. Joining us is a friend of On the Market, Ricky Rathore, owner of Remax Metropolis and a real estate lawyer. Ricky, welcome.
Thanks for having me again, guys.
Ricky, we've heard a lot about buyers and sellers and their expectations of realtors right now. And our first guest today was just talking about being asked if she was vaccinated prior to being let into a listing. What are you hearing on the street and from your agents?
It's a very touchy topic, guys. What we're finding, at least as far as our business are concerned, is that a lot of people are bringing a lot of emotion into this, and for good reason. At this point, I think many of the listeners would have heard of or have somebody in their immediate family or circle that's been directly impacted by this virus. And so it started out in the beginning where my office was getting death threats. I was getting death threats personally because our office continues to remain open as an essential service. And the reality is as we've kind of gone through the different motions of this pandemic, there's been a lot of changes. There's been a lot of things that have happened that have unfolded, impacting our businesses and how we transact. And so it's definitely an emotional one as far as the consumers are concerned.
Now, our previous guest, she mentioned that she has clients who came right out and asked if she was vaccinated. From the legal perspective, what do you think about that?
So it's interesting. When you put your property on the market, as an owner, you're supposed to have a candid conversation with your brokerage to establish what the guidelines are going to look like. Especially in a pandemic, the seller has to have informed consent in everything that they're doing. So a simple example I can give you is, if I, as a broker, intend on putting a lockbox at the property, I've got to let my client know, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there's a chance that this lockbox could get broken into. You may want to let your insurance company know that we're putting this lockbox up. There's different things that we have to do as far as informed consent is concerned. When a seller and a listing brokerage are having that conversation, it's important. A big part of what the brokerage does is have that dialogue and establish what are the things that are important to the client and what are the things that are not so important. And then further document those in the listing agreement so that everybody has an understanding. And this will then establish what will happen as far as the showings are concerned. Tina and Asif, a lot of people are very sensitive about this because now with our province of Ontario being, at a point where we've got so many people that are vaccinated, many employers, many restaurants, many businesses are requiring that, the patrons be double vaccinated. And, as far as we're hearing, there's going to be some sort of a passport or some sort of mechanism to be able to verify this information. So as a seller, I feel that it's unsafe for me and the other occupants of my home to not have somebody, to have somebody come in that's not vaccinated. That's within my right. This is not a protected ground. But unlike things like discrimination, those sorts of things where people cannot, for example, discriminate for employment and housing. When it comes to things like vaccination, this is not a protected status, and this is more of a thing where, it really comes down to what the comfort zone is for the owner.
And isn't the onus on the brokerage to follow through with those requests by the seller or by a buyer that, we need to protect our clientele, and part of protecting our clientele would be to follow through on their wishes to, say, only have vaccinated people come through their home? Is the onus on the realtor? Is it on the brokerage? How do we move forward with those requests?
So ultimately, after having that discussion and having that informed consent, the brokerage has to follow the instructions of the client. If the client's instructions are absurd or don't make sense, then the brokerage can say, look, with all due respect, we're not going to go ahead with this listing. It takes two hands to clap in a situation like this. And so it's really important fundamentally that both the brokerage, the realtor representing the brokerage, and the client that we're disposing of the asset for are all on the same page. If they're not and they can't come to terms, then it's probably for the best for everybody that they don't go through with that relationship and list that property. So that's a really important consideration. And again, it starts with the informed consent and having that conversation so that everybody understands what's going on. If a brokerage is listing a property and then not following through with those instructions, then that becomes a very problematic situation for the brokerage. And often with many listing brokerages today, in having that discussion about informed consent, we're letting clients know that these are the risks associated with having people come through your property whether they're vaccinated or not, you're opening up to that risk in a pandemic in any event. And so our office, for example, has an indemnity because we know that there's little or no insurance. If somebody walks to the property with COVID and COVID ends up impacting the household or the occupants of the household, there's no insurance coverage for something like that. And so it's really important that everybody's on the same page and has a good understanding of how these things are going to work out fundamentally.
So do you think, Ricky, that it's just good business then to mandate that agents be vaccinated?
I think, Tina, at the end of the day, it's a touchy topic because you've got people that, are for the vaccine, you've got people that are not for the vaccine, you've got people on the fence, you've got people with health concerns. And so I think it's for the policymakers to have that, discussion and to make that call. I don't think it's necessarily fair for the brokerage or the realtors to make a decision like that. And I think for the most part, following public guidelines, the average brokerage and agent that's operating today is going to ensure that whatever they're doing as safely as possible.
And we've heard from agents and, saying that, hey, I have small children at home. Hey, I live with my parents. I'm only going to work with vaccinated clients. Do you see this becoming the norm? And do you see more and more people asking for vaccination status as we move forward? And I mean, in York Region, Ricky, we're pretty fortunate that almost 80% of our region has been vaccinated. But do you see this becoming an issue as we move forward? And would the vaccine passport that you mentioned earlier, would that come into play and we would have to accept the vaccine passport or the vaccination, the proof of vaccination before we let people in?
I think things are going to, they're going to become more and more normal. I remember when we started out, at the front end of this pandemic, and a lot of brokerages had these showing forms that they were creating, right? I haven't traveled, I haven't been in contact with somebody with COVID, and there's a series of questions in that form. Well, now, the environment's entirely different. Some of those questions may or may not apply depending on whether you're vaccinated or not. But even today, some of those forms are becoming dated, and we're seeing the evolution, right? With things evolving in our society, I think the businesses are evolving and adapting as well. So I think that as time goes on and more shots are going in arms, I think it's going to become more normal. And if we've got an 80% vaccine rate that then goes to 90 and then 100, then these sorts of conversations won't be had anymore because we're all on the same page. But I think until we get to that point, there's going to be a lot of discussion around this. And at the end of the day, the realtor's job is to do the best they can given the situation, circumstances, and really do it in a way that's safe and effective and efficient. And with the tech and other things that we have, if a client says that, I really want vaccinated people in there, well, when we first went into the lockdown, we weren't able to do in-person showings for the beginning bit. So we took the technology. So if I'm an agent, I can't get the vaccine for health reasons or personal reasons or whatever the decision is, I can still help my client see the property online virtually. There's still other things. We have ways of transacting in real estate. So the good thing is that it's not one way or another per se. There is always another option as far as our businesses are concerned.
And that's a great point, especially when people will say, well, you're preventing me from seeing the property, where actually not, because there are many other ways that you can showcase that property to people that may or may not be allowed into the home. Ricky, if people want more information, how can they connect with you?
They can reach out to me at 416-731-8478. Again, 416-731-8478.
Always a pleasure to have you on, Ricky, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, guys. Bye for now.